Hello, and welcome to another Register Kettle, your chance to hear about the news from the people that write it. Now, it's been an interesting week in the field of security, and on Friday we got a bombshell. Brandon, do you want to explain what's going on with AT&T?
Yeah, wow. So if we thought that 73 million person leak of data records earlier this year, which to be fair was a couple years old and had just only been posted, if we thought that one was big, this one's even bigger. Apparently, according to AT&T, about 109.9 million customer records were exposed in this latest breach of what AT&T told me at first was a third-party cloud platform. It took me 3 attempts of asking, is this Snowflake? For them to finally tell me, yeah, it's Snowflake. And so,
I mean, that's a third of the American population. It's a huge issue.
This is a huge amount of data. Now, this doesn't include only AT&T customers. It also includes MVNO customers, so mobile virtual network operators. Anyone who runs on AT&T's network, right? They're included in this breach. AT&T told me that 107 million number or that 109 million number. It includes MVNO customers. So that's whatever other providers are using AT&T's network for their backbone. I'm not exactly sure off the top of my head who it is, and they didn't tell me which MVNOs might be unaffected. But yeah, we're looking at about 110 million people with their records being exposed. Now, these aren't super sensitive records, thankfully. This is mostly call and text metadata. So it's, it's who texted who and when, right? But that's basically it. There's no contents of the calls or the texts. And it's also not, it's anonymized to a certain degree, right? But
so passwords are hashed and usernames
there's no passwords involved in this. This is pure, like I said, pure metadata, right?
Okay.
Nothing belonging to a person that should be PII was in the breach, but AT&T said a subset, and they didn't identify how many of these, but a subset of the data stolen included connection to certain towers by their ID, right? So basically this data could be used, if you're smart enough to leverage it, could be used to geolocate somebody. And, it's not that hard to de-anonymize this kind of data, right? If you have, information on a handset or whatever, you can figure out who these things belong to. So theoretically, it could be used to geolocate AT&T and AT&T MVNO customers. No, AT&T said there's no evidence that that's happened yet. And so this isn't the most valuable, explicitly dangerous data, but it's a lot of it.
I was going to say, I mean, there's no social security numbers or unhashed credit card passwords or the rest of it,
right.
But it is deeply disturbing that this amount of data can get out there.
Right. Like, it raises a lot of questions, like what was AT&T doing hosting all this information in Snowflake in the first place, right? Why was it there? I mean, obviously Snowflake is mainly an cloud analytics platform. So they were doing some analytics with it, possibly, to do with,
but they have access to the data. I mean,
Jessica, exactly, right? Why is it there?
I mean, Jessica, you've been following Snowflake right from the very start. Can you just give us a quick backgrounder and fill us in on why this is being such a problem at the moment?
Yeah. So what happened? I mean, this is a breach that happened earlier this year. A financially motivated threat actor group, possibly affiliated with Scattered Spider, broke into Snowflake's environment and was able to access, according to Mandiant at least, more than 160 of their customers' data. None of these customers, also according to Mandiant, had multi-factor authentication turned on, and
which AT&T declined to answer when I asked.
Oh, really?
Well, I asked them point blank, did you guys have two-factor authentication turned on in this environment? And they just didn't address the question at all.
Yeah. I mean, I think at this point, we can assume anybody who reports that a third-party cloud provider was breached, environment was breached, I think we can kind of assume it was Snowflake at this point. And it's probably also safe to assume that they didn't have MFA turned on. Ticketmaster was one of the initial big victims that was caught up in this breach. And since then, it's just kind of been a steady trickle of more big names rolling out almost on a daily basis. I mean, with the number of AT&T, I think by the time this is over, it's going to be a very large portion of the American population.
What kind of boggles my mind about this whole thing, right, is that this entire Snowflake affair boils down to, like AT&T, right? Basically the same with the 2021 breach that they reported in March, right? They were like, neither of these were our systems. This isn't our fault. But, it's like if I rent a storage unit in my city to keep some of my stuff in, and I don't put a padlock on that thing, right? Or 2 padlocks, maybe, that's on me, right? At some point, we have to kind of think, right, data custody or who ownership takes, like, you're renting that space from a provider. You should be responsible for securing it. And it kind of seems disingenuous to me when these companies keep saying, well, it's not our fault. Well, you're the ones who didn't have 2FA tuned on. Come on,
Well, I mean, this is it. I mean, this is a question of due diligence. But I mean, I can remember at an Enigma conference, this was 10 years after Gmail put multi-factor authentication on their accounts. 10% of people were using it. Why are corporates not using this stuff?
I mean, when I was in IT, right? So this is obviously 10 plus years ago now, but when I was working in the IT sector, people still hated it, right? It was inconvenient. It was a pain in the butt. Now, granted, the sort of the difficulty in using MFA has been cut down over the years immensely, right? When I use it on things, I have an authenticator on my phone that I have linked to the function button on my iPhone 15. I just hold the button down. It automatically Face IDs me and opens up my prompts, and I can copy and paste between my phone and my laptop. Way easier than it was 10 years ago, right? But for some people, that's still enough friction that they don't want to deal with it. And that's, I think, a problem that really boils down to that sort of eternal tension between IT teams and the rest of their employees, right? I don't want to have to deal with having to put this code in every day when I log in, or if my laptop locks when I go to the bathroom. So I'm just going to find a way around it. Shadow IT continues to be a problem. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
there have been major improvements in this space, and things like pass keys and going passwordless, and using things like who runs Duo now? I forget who bought them. Cisco. And so there have been definitely ways to make this more frictionless. But when you bring up 2FA or MFA to a lot of people, they just kind of shudder, because this idea of getting locked out with no way of getting into their account, or not being able to access information or do their jobs, is just something they're just kind of.
And when you have a major organization, you're trying to roll it out across a really big organization. Again, it's that whole conflict, like Brandon was saying, between simplicity and security. And sometimes,
and I mean, then you have things like Google Authenticator, which is used by a lot of organizations, right? There's a cloud sync option on there where you can automatically sync all those keys to Google Cloud, right? But if you do that, then that eliminates the lost device problem. But again, it then turns the security of those master hashes or whatever to Google, and assumes that they're going to be a good custodian of them, right? So it's it's much safer then to keep those passwords on your device. But cloud solutions exist, but are they safe?
Well, I mean, this is it. When Google rolled out specially protected accounts for journalists, I signed up. And unfortunately, that means whenever I log in from a new machine, I have to have a key fob and a USB key to actually do it. Now, this is immensely safe, certainly. But for your average user, this is also a massive pain in the fundamentals. So, I mean, are we going to get round this problem? How are we going to get past the human aspect to secure yourself, but in a way which doesn't drive you bonkers?
I mean, that's kind of the eternal question, right? I mean, that's what everybody's been debating for the past couple decades, I think.
Yeah, that and patching both, right? How do you get past the human element, and patching is the same way?
Yeah, I mean, but when it comes to detecting this kind of stuff, okay, Tobias, you're our AI expert, and we have been promised an awful lot from AI over the last couple of years. Is this something that AI can sort out? I'm expecting better results to apply, but yeah.
This has sort of been the story for what, more than a decade now, of this idea that we'll use machine learning and heuristics to kind of detect the patterns of malicious software running on a machine, rather than having to kind of match and identify actual processes, because those can be masked so easily, and they can only detect things that we already have signatures for. So if there's a new form of malware or ransomware that we don't have a signature for, you can't detect it. And so the idea has for a long time been that we can write machine learning algorithms to kind of match the behaviors that these machine learning or these malware exhibit. And, a classic example, going back to when I first started covering this concept of AI and security and AI and kind of operations, has been this idea that the CPU will show some signs that the encryption unit has spun up, and that's a sign that somebody is trying to lock down and ransom your hard drive. But the problem with all of these is that for it to run in real time, it is horrendously performance inhibitive. You have to keep the models really small. And that means the logic can't be that invasive. You have to constantly be balancing this, because if somebody's fans are spinning constantly, and their battery is constantly draining because the IT team turned on heuristic security, and then there's also the potential of false alarms where you're doing something legitimate, but all of a sudden it gets locked down because it thinks that what you're doing is illegitimate now.
It does hark back to the 1990s and what you were saying, in that when antivirus software first got put on PCs, a lot of people were turning it off because the processor load was too heavy. It seems like we're going back in that direction. Is that the case?
I think that modern hardware is helping to mitigate a lot of this. We've seen, in small part, we've seen push towards putting efficiency cores into notebooks, and so you can offload things under that. Now the big thing is putting a lot of this machine learning work onto neural processing units in order to run it in real time without any noticeable impact in terms of the battery life or the performance of your machine, because it's not running on the same unit that is running your web browser or rendering graphics for you. And so now it can be a whole lot more transparent. And since that NPU is only designed to do machine learning workloads, you have a potential where you can avoid a lot of the performance pitfalls. Now, you still can have situations where there are false alarms, but the idea here is as these NPUs get faster and more capable, the models the heuristic models and the machine, you could have potentially large language models written to identify processes and behaviors that can be much, much larger and much more involved in how they go about this process and have a much smaller impact. And companies like CrowdStrike are already doing this. They're already working with Intel and presumably AMD and Qualcomm to put those capabilities into their software.
Interesting.
It kind of makes me...
Sorry, Brandon.
I was just going to say, it kind of makes me wonder, how long until we're figuring out, or until we're confronting the fact that, oh gosh, all these malware creators have figured out how to defeat these heuristic models by changing the way their malware behaves. How adaptable, Tobias, you might have a better idea than I do. How adaptable are these things going to be if people decide, well, we can just change the way our malware functions?
Well, that's the big question here. Technological advancements, improvements in hardware always can enable new things, bigger models, more capable models, models with fuzzier logic. And so you can have something that, stares at process behavior and is better about flagging things that are less implicit. And so it's hard to say whether or not this is actually going to be an improvement, because you still are going to have to fall back on retraining those models in order to detect behaviors, and that takes time. So the question
and resources:
how quickly can the models be retrained in order to detect emerging threats?
And how adaptable are they? This would seem like a logical LLM model, scenario to work with. But Jessica, what are you getting from the security industry on this? Is AI just they're slapping it on their existing products, or is there a genuine move to try and get smarter security systems out there?
I think it's both, really. Most companies right now are touting some level of AI in their products, their security products, because it's a buzzword. That's what we see every single time there's this buzzy new technology, and it happens to be AI right now. At the same time, there are definite benefits to this. The scanning capabilities, AI can be used, obviously, to detect things a lot easier in the logs than a human. So it's a little bit of both right now. But then we also are seeing some of the criminals get smarter with malware development too. And they are really investing in ways to evade detection to make it harder to pick up. So it's kind of both sides. It's who's staying ahead. Is it the defenders or is it the criminals? And it's this constant race.
It's kind of an evolutionary Red Queen battle, I guess. One side gets better, the other side gets better, right. And there we go. Okay, well, thank you very much. Sorry.
I was to say the eternal arms race between malware slingers.
It's never going to stop,
Well, yeah, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry for the criminals too, so it pays to invest in this, unfortunately.
Oh, the amount of money out there is insane that they're ripping us off for.
Just wait until everyone has an Elon Musk implant in their heads. It'll be even better.
Yeah, right. Okay.
We'll be on Mars by then anyway, so that's okay.
Good point.
Well, on that happy thought, we shall bow to his muskiness. I, for one, welcome my new, slightly crazy overlord, and we'll see how the weekend bears out. Thank you very much, Brandon, Tobias, Jess, and we'll be back next week with another Kettle.